Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm Becky.
And I'm Chloe.
And here we are again for another Kingkiller Chronicles conspiracy video.
Why do we keep doing this? Why do I keep doing this with my life? Why am I here?
Well, this time we actually had another request. So one of our viewers, Constance Burnett, said, could you talk about the Masters of the University? And I kind of asked what exactly they wanted about them, and they said, I want to know everything there is to know about the Masters. Their past and some hidden truths about them seem like a very good place to start, because that's what I had suggested. So, here we go, talking about the university. So, I figured we could just go through each of the Masters and see what kind of facts we have about them and what kind of theories we can come up with. So, we're going to start with the best, Elodin. He's my favorite character, and I love him. So, Elodin is the Master Namer. That's his title. He is, quote, younger than the others by at least a dozen years. So, like, I feel like the question I always think about is how old is, I'm always thinking, how old is anyone ever in fiction? But, like, particularly with Elodin, because he is supposedly so much younger than them. Is he, like, late 20s? Like, 30? Like, I mean, because it makes it seem like the other ones are in their 40s. Like, at one point it does say, later on I wrote, the Chancellor is said to be, like, in his 40s somewhere. So if Elodin is, like, 12 years younger than 40, then he's, like, 28 at the youngest, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it says at least a dozen years, so that's like could be even more.
Could be even younger.
Yeah.
So I guess I would think he's around like 28, 32. But I keep thinking about the whole like timeline of Elodin, because our next facts that we have about him, that it says in chapter 44 of the first book, is that 5 years ago, Elodin was the Chancellor. He was admitted to the university when he was 14, or barely 14. He became a full Arcanist by 18, and then he stayed around as a Giller for a while after that.
Can you remind me what a Giller is?
So a Giller is like a teacher's assistant, basically. So some of the Masters...
he went from TA to Chancellor?
Well, I don't know. Like, I would assume you would have to be a master to be a chancellor.
Did he go from, like, TA to chancellor to teacher? Like, is that his career path? Why did they make him the chancellor?
Well, this was before he went crazy. This was all before some, like, events happened that then they locked him up after that. I would assume that the Chancellor has to be a master, because like the current Chancellor is the Master Linguist, like that's his other title. So I don't see why they would make somebody who's not even a teacher the Chancellor. Like he must have been a Giller and then become a master for a few years and then become Chancellor, but all of this took place in like 10 years apparently, like between him being 14 and...
What if he was only the Chancellor for like a month? At what point did he go cray? Was that during him being the Chancellor? Because maybe he was like, they were like, here, guy, you're in charge, you can be the Chancellor, and then he's the Chancellor for like a short period of time, and then he went cray, and they're like, oh, never mind.
So they say Elodin was the youngest ever admitted, the youngest to make Arcanist, and the youngest to be Chancellor. Will and Sim are explaining this to him, and they're like, yeah, by the way, like 5 years ago he used to be Chancellor, and he's like, what?
Same. Same.
Even so, you have to admit he's a little odd to be Chancellor. Not back then, Simon said. Well, yeah. He said that was before it happened. And then he's like, it? And they're like, something. They do not speak on it. They locked him in the crockery until he got most of his marbles back. And then Simon is like, I don't like thinking about it. I mean, a couple of students go crazy every term, right? It might happen to any of us. So basically, like, Will and Sim just kind of chalk it up to, like, yeah, you know, sometimes students just go crazy. Like, it just happens. But, I mean, I don't know.
Do sometimes chancellors just go crazy, too?
Right, like, I feel like he made it through all of his schooling at such a young age. He became an Arcanist, like, he was working there. He made it through all of that as a student, not going crazy, but then suddenly, when he becomes Chancellor, it all hits him and it becomes too much, like...
Do you think the Chancellor has to, like, do some sketchy things?
Like what?
Like you become the Chancellor and it's like you're in charge of the door now.
I mean...
Maybe if you're the Chancellor, you get like more access than the other ones.
Yeah, like...
Or something.
Well, if the university...
But then something happened to him in the door and then he became cray.
If the university has ulterior motives than just teaching students, then maybe the Chancellor is more involved in something else, and dealing with that suddenly made him go crazy. Or maybe he didn't really, like, go crazy, but, like, something happened to him.
They didn't believe
magically.
him?
Yeah, I don't know, like...
So, we need to, like, create a timeline, like, Elodin's life. 14, comes to university, we don't know what he was doing before that. He was an Arcanist by 18, so I guess he was in school for those 4 years. And then stayed around as a Giller after that. We don't know how long that was. And then, like you said, probably would make more sense to become an actual teacher before becoming the Chancellor.
Yeah, I would assume you would have to. The also question is, like, who was the previous Master Namer?
That's
like...
what I was wondering, because I'm like, at what point... Literally, just now, what was in my head was... At what point was Chronicler in school? Because remember, Chronicler was talking about, yeah, I went to university, and, like, the Master Namer did... something, and we were like, was that Elodin or was that like pre-Elodin? Right. Are they just the master forever, like until they die, or like is this just, like, because there's only 9 of them, so like how do they ever get new ones? Is there 9 Chandrian? No. There's 7. Because Elodin must have had a Master Namer teaching him, but then he just left and Elodin just got the job like immediately. Well, like, Elodin killed him. No, because then also like the pictures are so concerning to me, because like that card picture, I know it's not official art, but all the other ones in that set, that Kickstarter card set, are very accurate, but Elodin looks like he's like 16. So I'm just like, what's the truth? Is he an ageless, timeless being? Yeah, speaking of, is he human or not? It always describes his eyes as being very, like, captivating and, like, enthralling. Most notably during the scene where he's trying to calm down Kvothe after he calls the wind. He, like, comes in there and, like, grabs his face and is, like, staring at him, and Kvothe is like, oh my god. But, like, I mean, in that instance, it could make sense as being attributed to the power of naming. You know, he's doing some kind of naming thing on him in that moment, so it would make sense that his eyes would be going crazy. But there are plenty of other times where it describes his eyes as, like, so, like, captivating and whatnot. Or, like, just his whole demeanor, basically, and his whole, like, his voice. Some examples of this is in chapter 36, book 1, he says, I felt Master Elodin look at me. Actually felt it. So I'm like, okay. What does that mean? Like, it's so intense. Like, his gaze is so intense. And then later on in that chapter it says, he had an accent that I couldn't quite place. Or perhaps it was that his voice held a certain resonance. When he spoke, everyone at the desk stirred slightly, or then grew still, like leaves touched by the wind. So his eyes are looking into him, his soul. His voice is like doing some kind of magic at him. But then chapter 40, it says, I had forgotten how Elodin's light voice moved through the deep places in your chest when he spoke. Book 2, chapter 8, this is more eye content when he's like deeply looking into Kvothe's eyes randomly. It says, for a heartbeat it was simply unsettling. Then it almost felt like the light on the stairway grew dim, or that I was suddenly being thrust deep underwater and the pressure was keeping me from drawing a full breath. Chapter 9. His eyes were dark and his voice had a strange resonance to it. It wasn't loud, but when he spoke, it seemed to fill the entire hall. It left no space for any other sound. The room seemed unnaturally quiet when he stopped speaking, as if his voice had left a hole in the world. What if they're just both related to Lanre? They don't know. I mean... What if Kvothe and Elodin are related? What if he's a Lackless? Oh, then he could open the door. Maybe he did open the door. That's why he went in there! And that's what made him cray! Maybe. There was weird shit in there! Maybe! There was some kind of whack stuff going on! And he was like, oh my god, y'all! And they were like, nah. Like, you couldn't have possibly opened the door. You're cray, because they don't know.
Right, maybe.
It's my new theory.
So during this part, he says, you know, his eyes go crazy and his voice goes crazy in this moment where he's asking Kvothe, you know, he asked him a stupid question. They're all like, oh my god, like, why are you asking such stupid questions? And he's like, what? What do you want me to do? You want me to ask him a question that only a namer would know the answer to? Okay. And then he asks him, where does the moon go when it's no longer in our sky? Like, that's the question he asked. So I'm like, why is that a question that only namers know the answer to? Because, like, you know, that makes me think of the whole truth behind Ajax stealing the moon and the whole, like, creation war truth. So I'm just like, what do you know about this, Elodin? You know, like...
Do namers have to know about it because Lanre was a namer? So he's like Papa... Granddaddy Lanre, we need to know our history.
He's the original. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess those people, like Ajax and Lyra and Santos, were like the original best namers ever.
Because we're on this question, right, of is Elodin some kind of creature because he does all these things that are weird, knows about all this fairy things. But, like, I don't know, does it have to do with just, like, that's what naming is? And he's just really good at it? Or is there, like, a reason that he is really good at it? Is it because he has fairy blood or lackless blood or something, and then Kvothe is the same, and that's why he's also really good at it?
Right, because that's the thing, is, like, what makes this even more suspicious, in a way, is that when Kvothe is talking to Felurian, or when he first meets her, he's talking about how her voice is so weird, and then he eventually says, there was only one person I'd ever heard whose voice was similar to this, Elodin. So he immediately is like, okay, he has the same, like, Felurian and Elodin have the same thing going on. So it's like, is that because they both have naming abilities, or is it because they both have fae qualities?
So, okay, here's a question. What about Bast? Because Bast is a fae, so he would have things in common with Felurian, but not necessarily with Elodin. Because as far as we know, Bast is not a namer. Right? But, so Bast also has, like, weird, intense eye shit, kind of. As far as we know, he doesn't describe Bast's voice as being all weird, does he?
Yeah, I mean, his eyes, I think, definitely they do describe as being strange. I don't know if, like, in moments where he's being, like, threatening, if it describes his voice differently.
If Bast is not described with that, then you would think it's, like, naming related and not fairy related.
And Kvothe is also described in that way, like present day Kvothe.
Right, but we don't know what his deal is.
Well, right.
We need to figure it out. That's why we're doing process of elimination.
Well, right, but I mean, Kvothe is this pretty much the same boat as Elodin, because we know that he is a namer. We don't know if he also has fairy blood. But then there's also this moment where when he's in Ademre and he's talking to the lady there who is like the namer of the Adem. She like gives him his Adem name. He says her eyes were like Elodin's. Elodin was the only other person I had met who could look at you like that, as if you were a book he was idly thumbing through. So we know that this lady here is a naming person. Like, she doesn't seem to have any ties to the Fae, so maybe it is just a naming thing.
But did they get the naming, like, from the fairies?
Well, I don't know. So, pulling it back into the fairy world...
The veil of the fairies!
When Kvothe comes back to the university, after having been in the fairy world, and he's wearing his cloak, Elodin is the only person who knows that he's wearing a shade, and he says, I wouldn't be much of a namer if I couldn't spot a fairy cloak a dozen feet away. And he says, here's a piece of old magic man rarely lays a finger on. So I'm just like, first of all, why does being a namer make you good at identifying fairy cloaks? Like, how is that related at all? Like, is naming just an inherently fae thing that
maybe
knowing
they
naming
learned naming from the fairies. I don't know what the other magic stuff is, but maybe it's different somehow, and that's why the naming people are always going cray, because they can't handle all the fairy magic.
Maybe
it's too different from their like
human magic. Are they actually by blood related to these original namers, or not? Like, you know, like Lyra and Ajax, and because that was before the fairy world existed. So were they
so they
fairies?
Even have fairies back then.
Like, it's just that specific blood that then became like fairies. I don't know. But then it's also like how he's saying this is such an old type of magic that no one ever sees. So I'm like, okay, if no one ever sees it, how do you know what it is? Like, why are you able to recognize it on sight immediately? Like, why is it something that all namers know if it's such an old thing that human man rarely lays a finger on? Like, he must have been in the fairy world to have seen this. So Elodin must have been to the fairy world at some point, either as a young person, like as throughout his schooling. I don't know when he had time for that, when he was going through school in only 4 years, but like,
he's just so smart.
Or is he just so old he's actually from that time period? Because then we have where Elxadal is talking about naming, and he says at himself he knows 2 names. And he says 2 is a great number of names to know these days. Elodin says it was different long ago. I'm just like,
maybe Elodin just knows his history.
I mean,
you need to know the naming.
I guess. I'm like, why does Elodin know how different it was long ago? And Elxadal doesn't, when Elxadal was Elodin's teacher. Like,
so that means he learned it not at school. Who's the master namer before Elodin? Maybe he learned it from him. Maybe
right,
he was
I guess.
something. Maybe he's the one that's magical.
Maybe.
And he taught Elodin all of that. All of the things from the past.
I guess, probably. So I guess that is one solution. The other solution is just that Elodin just was there all those years ago. Because then there's also this quote in chapter 50 of the book 2, where it says...
What if there's time travel? What if when he went in the door, he went into the past? What if it goes to the beginning of the war thing and he witnessed it all? And that's what made him cry. He was like, oh my god.
Maybe. Maybe. Well, so, I mean, another suspicious comment that he makes is, things have changed. There are even fewer edges now than there were before. The world is less wild, there are fewer magics, more secrets, and only a handful of people who know the name of the wind. I don't really know what this means, but again, he's talking about the past, saying, oh, how everything is all different now, and I'm just like, were you there? Like, what?
If he's a creature, then why was he going to school? Maybe he's undercover, I don't know, for the fairies. But I was gonna say, as a 14-year-old, joined the school and then is, aging like a normal human. So I don't know why he would be doing that if he was like a fairy or like some other kind of creature. Like why? Like why have this whole ruse so you can work at this school?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense. So that makes me think that he is a human, but like he just has knowledge about things and like extra abilities. Maybe now I'm really suspicious of who's the previous?
Right, I was gonna say maybe Skarpi was the previous master namer.
What if he was?
Because he has all the info. Oh my god, that would be wild. Oh. And Chronicler knows him too. Maybe he was his master namer.
Yeah. Do you think that Skarpi's the master namer, and then he was, taking Elodin under his wing because he knows that, oh, this guy, he's really good at naming. But Skarpi was like, okay, you are gonna replace me. You need to be in charge. I'm gonna go do whatever I gotta go do. I don't know what he's doing.
Maybe.
But maybe he was the teacher and then Elodin was the giller, and he's like, okay, I've been training you as my assistant teacher. You're gonna take over the post now. And then maybe because Skarpi is sketch and knows all these things, when Elodin became the teacher, he got access to more things that he didn't have, and that's why he went cray.
Maybe.
Because it was too whack. I don't know.
Could be. Going back to the door then. When
Kvothe back to the door.
When Kvothe mentions the door to Elodin, he's like, oh yeah, that door. Like, nope, you don't get to know about it. And he's like, Valeritas, God, I can still remember what it was like standing down there looking at the door, wondering. And then he says, no, you don't get to go behind the 4-plate door. And I'm just like, so did you get to go behind it? Do you know what's behind it? Like, it makes it seem like he knows what's behind it. It says, Fella had a dream. She sees a tomb of an old dead king named Valeritas behind the door.
Why is Fella having cryptic dreams about Valeritas? Because she works in the archives.
Right, so
She's
she
having
has
a sketchy dream about it?
Right, because she has seen the door as well. So she and Kvothe talk about it at some point, and he's like, yeah, what's up with that door? And she's like, I don't know, man. I also wonder what's up with that door. And she says, like, once I had a dream where there was a tomb of a king named Valeritas behind the door.
What if that's in there?
Yeah, maybe?
If it's a tomb in there, I don't know if it's Valeritas or Ajax or whomever, but if they're in the tomb, what if you open the door, it will let them out?
Yeah, like,
And
revive
they'll,
them?
they'll rise from the
Yeah.
dead.
Well, I mean, it does kind of seem like it's a tomb, because if the Shapers are in there, they were, like, killed back in the day, right?
So why are you not supposed to go in there? It's gonna let them out?
Yeah. So maybe Elodin went in there, and
He let them out?
well, no, I don't. Or maybe he just opened it and like saw something and went crazy.
Yeah, that's what I've
And
been
then-
saying.
Yeah, but he didn't let them out. He closed it before they got out.
Yeah, but then
Right.
Kvothe's gonna let them out.
Yeah.
And that's why the world's fucked up.
Yeah, I think he is. So I kind of believe that Elodin. I mean, if he's Lackless blood, he could open it himself. So maybe he went in there, and that's why everyone was like, what the heck happened to you? Like, this is weird. We're not going to talk about this. You know?
Oh, I was gonna ask earlier when Will and Sim are talking about it, does it seem like they know what happened, but they don't want to talk about it, or they don't know what happened?
They make it seem like the Masters never said what actually happened.
Oh, okay.
But it definitely seems more suspicious than that.
Yeah, he did something with that door.
Yeah.
Because why would he be like, no, you don't get to go in there?
Right. Well, but then why would he be acting so like casually about it now when Kvothe asks him about it? He's like, oh
he's
yeah,
Elodin.
good old Valeritas. Back when I used to look at that door all the time.
Because it's
like,
Elodin and he's whack. Like, what do you mean?
But I mean, also
He's doing all kinds of weird stuff all the time. Like,
Well, yeah, but I also kind of am like, is he really crazy though, or is it just like an act?
for what reason, though?
I don't know. Maybe he's doing some secret mission things there that he doesn't want anyone else to know about, so he just acts crazy and like, because he's
Being
like
crazy be
like,
more suspicious?
Well, no, because they just chalk it up to everybody goes crazy. They just think he went crazy because he is an Arcanist.
And they just let him do whatever he wants?
Well, yeah, because here's the other thing.
Why do they
The
let
next
him
point.
teach?
Well,
Why
here's
don't they fire him?
he doesn't teach. He
what's
doesn't
he
teach
doing?
though. He doesn't actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm
teach.
saying. Why is he still there?
Exactly.
Unless they're all in cahoots.
Right.
They're all in cahoots.
Exactly. So like, he doesn't like at all these admissions interviews. He like rarely ever talks or asks questions, because anytime he does, they're always like, oh my god, what, you're here? Oh. It maybe doesn't even show up to the meeting sometimes, because in this one part the Chancellor's like, oh, we're all 8 here, and he's like, oh sorry, there's 9 of us. It's just like, they're just used to Elodin not being there. So he like doesn't come to meetings, doesn't ask questions at meetings hardly ever, doesn't teach class, or like teaches 1 class a year, you know, randomly, suddenly. So it's just like, what is he doing with his time? Like, he must be there for a reason. He must be doing something. Like, he goes and, you know, visits the asylum frequently, I guess, to check up on his people in there. And when he goes in there, he acts like pretty normal and like calm and chill, talking to them, trying to calm them down. So if you yourself were also crazy, like, how would you be able to like soothe other crazy people? You know, like he like
Does he understand
so I'm just like, I don't believe it. I don't think he really is crazy.
So
like,
what do you think he's doing?
Okay. So I also just had a thought. The whole like Taborlin the Great theory. If he is Taborlin the Great had dealings with the Chandrian in the past. He was locked up by them. So if that's
what made him cry.
if that's what happened to Elodin, if he also had dealings with the Chandrian, maybe now he's currently trying to figure out how to defeat the Chandrian, and only takes interest in certain students that come along every now and then that have naming abilities that he sees and realizes that they have potential. So
to
he
help
just
him with his fight.
right, yes, to recruit them and train them, and then be like, now we can open the door and defeat or whatever.
They're not
I don't
even
know.
doing that.
Well, he's teaching them.
Like, Quoth is trying to figure out how can I defeat the Chandrian? No one believes in them. No one is listening. No one cares. And then Elodin is over here having a whole secret battle with them. Like, that would be so annoying if that was true. Like, oh my god, just talk to your fucking teacher that you're, like, buddies with.
Well, yeah, maybe
Like-
eventually Kvothe will finally get up the courage to tell Elodin
What if
a lot
Elodin
closer.
is the one that dies and not Denna?
Or maybe if it's a metaphor for, or if not a metaphor, but like a parallel with Taborlin being locked up by the Chandrian and then breaking out the same way that Elodin broke out. If the university is the one that locked Elodin up, then maybe the university is the Chandrian after all.
I kind of agree, but I don't think they are the Chandrian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they are
Yes,
either.
because-
Like,
No, listen! Because who's telling that story? Cobb and them? We've established in this that people don't tell the story that is what really happened. So the real story is that Elodin was cray and the university was like, we're locking you up, and he busted
Yeah.
out. But somehow that story got translated to, oh, he got captured by the Chandrian. You know, they're
Right.
evil.
Yeah.
They're doing bad stuff. He had to fight them, and
Yeah.
that's not what happens at all.
Yeah, that
so it
makes
could have
sense.
originated from that story still. There's a lot of, like, parallel between Kvothe and Elodin. The question is always like, is it just a parallel to be a parallel? Like, oh,
Right.
they're both very, like, talented and, like, doing all this stuff at a young age. And then it's just like, oh, yeah, Kvothe, you're also gonna have, like, a downfall kind of thing. Because, you know, Elodin, he went cray, he had to be locked up. He's not the Chancellor anymore. I mean, he's still there, so he's fine, I guess. But obviously, Kvothe is gonna have some kind of bad thing happen to him. But I don't know if it's just, like, a parallel like that, or if it's because they have similarities because there's actually, like, a reason. Like I was saying, like, are they related? Do they have the
Right.
same fairy blood or
Right.
lackless blood?
that is ultimately the question. So some additional things about Elodin. He really hates Hem, which I mean, you know, we all do.
I'm still waiting for the Hem and Ambrose versus Elodin and Kvothe throwdown.
I mean, honestly,
to happen.
yeah. Again, I don't know how much older Hem is. Like, he seems like a younger one, honestly, but he still must be
'Cause
like
he's a little bitch.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because he's so
You'd
yeah.
expect someone younger to act like that.
Right, he's more immature when dealing with Kvothe, and they're always like, "Shut up, like stop it." But he must at least be 40 again. You know, he has to at least be 12 years older than Elodin. So I was kind of like, was he a teacher when Elodin was a student, like some of the other ones were, or were they just teachers together? So yeah, I don't know why he specifically hates him.
Again,
And-
is it just a parallel between him and Ambrose?
Yeah. So then we also know that it's pretty certain that he knows who Auri actually is. He knows that she has been there for years, it says. And like he's been trying to talk to her for years. And we know that she was a student. And like she must have been a student fairly recently because she's like not that much older than Kvothe. I don't know, that's just interesting that he like definitely knows who she is. He also speaks the Adem language, which again is another like parallel with Kvothe, but it's kind of like, why did you do the exact same things that Kvothe is doing? Like, how do you know everything in the world? Like, literally, when did you have time to go to the Feywild and a Demre and get your Arcanist thing and be a Giller and be a teacher and be the Chancellor? It's just like, how did you do all this stuff in like 10 years? And then the last part about Elodin is in chapter 149 of Wise Man's Fear, when Kvothe asks him about people that change their name all the time, and he just like freaks out immediately. I'm just like, this scene is so weird and suspicious, and he doesn't explain why he freaks out about it and has such a dramatic reaction. But like it seems like it has to somehow relate to Kvothe in the future, like changing his name or doing whatever he did with his name,
Like foreshadowing.
yeah, like foreshadowing of that's a terrible thing to do, like don't do that, because Elodin is like, oh my god, what, like what did you do, like who's doing
Yeah,
this, like don't do that. And so it must be like, I don't know, it's just so
Maybe
weird.
you can never get it back.
Right, like what does that mean if you change your name? Like what does it mean? Why is it so terrible? But he doesn't explain it, so
1 hour just Elodin.
this is just the Elodin video, I guess.
So we realized while filming this that we spent literally an entire hour just talking about Elodin. So we're gonna split this into 2 parts once again. So part 1 is Elodin. and then part 2 will be all the other teachers. So stay tuned for part 2. Thank you for watching us talk about Elodin.
Let us know your thoughts on Elodin. I sure love him. Feel free to check out our other Name of the Wind conspiracy videos, and stay tuned soon for part 2. See you then!